On January 31st, 2024, Konami delivered us the first Silent Hill title in 10 years, aside from the train wreck of Silent Hill Ascension, titled simply Silent Hill: The Short Message. Silent Hill has never strayed far from incredibly dark themes depicted within its narratives, and they're always masterfully creatively blanketed with subtext and subtlety, allowing the player to neurologically dissect their respective themes at their own pace. That being said, welcome to my short synopsis of Silent Hill: The Short Message. Massive spoiler warning for those who haven't yet experienced the game, and I highly advise that you do so before viewing this. It's simply beautiful. The Short Message deep dives the psychology and state of mind of its protagonist Anita, who's arrived at a dilapidated and abandoned apartment building, the site of many young suicides, after receiving text messages from her longtime friend, Maya. Anita is an ordinary, troubled, and victimized teenager with no outstanding qualities, who suffered a lifetime of abuse and ridicule from her peers. Finding solace in her best friend Amelie, Anita neurologically copes with the existential dread and pressure of socializing and day-to-day school life of a teenager. Not long after she awakens within the run-down corridors of the abandoned dwellings, and some brief exchanges with Amelie via text, she begins to experience visions of a lanky, cherry blossom-themed stalker, garbed in a simple, pristine, white sweater. The graffiti left by various underground artists and her manic episodes and desperate pleas for recognition evokes the memory of her friend Maya, an artist that frequently used cherry blossoms as a motif within her art pieces, with her art often depicting and signifying growth and healing through past traumatic events. Later in the game, in messages sent to Anita by Amelie, confirmed that Maya had committed suicide 6 months prior, and this revelation further erodes Anita's mental state. In her vulnerability, she descends on a self-deprecating spiral, delving deeper into the depths of her own psyche, and uncovers her past subconscious traumas of her home life. Emerging from this spiral, Anita finds herself reduced to the height of a young child, and surveys a ruined and messy household that progressively decays to a worsened state the further she descends. Through documentation and a note seemingly left by her mother, she expresses her wishes to cherish her children, and not suffer unto them the abuse she suffered from her own mother, who repeatedly expressed her contempt for her and her disgust. Upon further reading, it's discovered that her father had passed away on account of heavy substance abuse, and that her mother was desperate for any form of comfort within another person through tragic loss. After not taking warmly to the man her mother had been seeing, Anita and her brother were punished by being locked in a closet overnight, her mother subconsciously exhibiting similar disciplinary measures her mother had taken against her, falling into the same destructive habits that had worsened over time. The man she had been seeing began to connect with her less frequently, and this disengagement contributed to her deteriorating mental state. A perceived victim of abuse, and not feeling desirable enough for anyone, she inevitably fell into the same vindictive pattern of blaming and neglecting her kids for her own hardships, inevitably falling into the same patterns of anger and abuse her mother had exhibited, malnourishing her children. This child abuse led to the death of Anita's younger brother, and after escaping the closet one night, Anita escapes to a neighbor's house, and Child Protective Services are contacted, leading to Anita's placement within a foster home. In further documentation, we read an excerpt regarding a young girl receiving an acceptance letter to a revered college. The young girl is elated, yearning and eager to earn her parents' approval, but the girl's family was in a time of financial hardship. Distraught at all the hard work and dedication ultimately leading to nothing, and her world crumbling around her, it could be inferred that this girl likely became one of the suicide victims of this Kettenstock complex. Or one could possibly interpret this girl to be Amelie herself, which explains the desperation and desire for acceptance and connection from Anita's point of view. Due to her stunted social development, Anita sees Amelie as her only true friend and connection, and when Maya and Amelie exhibit friendly chemistry, it makes Anita panic and fall into a frenzy, further amplifying her feeling of ostracization in the belief that she's gone unnoticed and neglected from her friend. Much like Anita, Maya had similarly suffered many accounts of harassment and bullying, being an outcast at school, and was frequently degraded by her peers, but most of her critique and harassment came in the form of cyberbullying, with people harshly criticizing her art. This bond between friends is a frequent motif. After suffering for a long time on the bitter end of this abuse, Maya is driven to suicide, with the philosophy that life should be as a cherry blossom is, delicate and beautiful, but wistfully swept away, and in her eyes, death is an ascension from her convictions, depicted in her art as an angel with blossom wings. It's later revealed that Maya had written one final letter to Amelie, a plea for help, a desperate cry to be reminded that life is worth living. But in a jealous rage, Anita had discovered the letter and kept it from Amelie, not knowing the degraded mental state of their friend, Maya. Through all her trauma, Anita ultimately decides to join Maya in her ascension, eager to free herself from the shackles of her guilt. But after plunging from the roof and awakening once again in the dilapidated building, and ending up atop the roof once more, she conveys the truth of her actions to Amelie, and resigns herself to her suicide in efforts to make amends. But just as she's about to take her final step, she receives a notification on her phone from Amelie forgiving her, and that they should meet to talk things over and begin to build anew. Anita falls back in shock, as her composure finally cracks, as her built-up trauma and guilt is whisked away by the winds and the brilliant light rays of the sun, as it breaks away the gray ominous fog and obscuring gray clouds, a reminder that all it takes is a helping hand, and that there's beauty to be found in life, a reason to live, a reason to keep fighting. Now, in regards to the game's themes and symbolism, firstly, it's important to note just what the cherry blossom flower represents. It's widely believed in Japanese mythology that the cherry blossom flower is symbolic of both life and death, a thing of beauty and vibrancy, but within that beauty resides a limited lifespan, a fleeting reminder that life and time is a fleeting concept. This serves as the foundation for Maya's art, the idea of her suicide, and the design of the stalking figure that relentlessly pursues Anita through her psyche. It's my belief that the Sakura Blossom creature that pursues Anita is meant to be a horrific manifestation of her mother, and also an amalgam of the vindictive nature of her selfish actions and the resentment she harbored toward her daughter, and the childhood neglect that Anita suffered as a child. Despite its seemingly simple design, it's important to note how the creature appears to be garbed in the same pristine white sweater that her friend Maya had frequently worn, as I believe this to be representative of her directly. It's likely that this white sweatshirt symbolizes just how Anita perceived her friends, not mainly as people, but for a blanket to mask her history of traumatic childhood abuse, a subconscious desperation to feel any sort of connection and security, or grasp any comforting reality apart from her own. As for the symbology of what happens if the monster catches Anita, I'm not sure how to interpret it exactly, because to me it's interpretable in a number of ways. The first of which is that the creature is a direct manifestation of Anita's idea and vision of Maya, eager to prevent her inevitable thoughts of suicide so as to not follow within the same path. Or the more likely of the two, being that Anita's death represents the fear and negative emotions ultimately consuming her and letting the intrusive thoughts win. Throughout the course of the game, we learn through its events that Anita is a vulnerable and recovering teen with a past history of self-harm. The harbored resentment of her mother breaking her down with the abuse and neglect causing inevitable irreparable damage to her psyche, Anita's desperation and desire for inclusivity among her peers, her father descending further and further into his alcoholism and substance abuse, even the cyberbullying concept plays a very pivotal role in the game. It's evident that the game's themes are a bit overt for a Silent Hill, but that doesn't subtract from the short message's depth. Tried and true, it's most certainly a noteworthy Silent Hill title for its roughly hour-and-a-half runtime, and still manages to wear the moniker well. As much as I would love to make a video on this, intercut with clips of gameplay, I'm much too lazy for it, and it's a ton of editing work. So if you've played the short message for yourself, I would love to hear your interpretations. What did you think of the short message? Is it worthy of being a Silent Hill title to you? What does it mean to you? What does the Sakura Blossom creature represent for you? Thank you for watching my synopsis of Silent Hill, the short message.